Welcome to Door Insider, where we take a deep dive into the mindset, the why, and the how of the industry's top entrepreneurs, leaders, recruiters, and salespeople. We are the Door Nation. Here is your host, Lee Barber. Let's go.
All right, gang. Welcome to Door Insider Season 4. Today's special guest is Misty Barber. Misty started in the industry with Vivint Plus in 2018. Her first quarter in, she was the MVP with 20 sold and 19 pulled through. That's some pretty good pull through right there. Then she won the Culture Award her second quarter in. Misty was a Vivint Plus for 6 months, and in those 6 months, she had a total installed account of 50 accounts. So 50 accounts in 6 months. Great job. In 2019, she started a dealer with Arcadia Solar. In her first year, she sold and managed all operations to scale. Continuing on to 2020 through 2022, she did full operations for the dealer, doubling in size of team members and volume year after year. After 3 years in the industry, Misty hit her first seven-figure income. So she's a seven-figure income earner. In 2023, currently, Misty is the co-operations director with me in the tri-state region for LGCY Power. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Got
to be able to get through the podcast.
A little emotional. I was with Jake, and he said, "Why haven't you done Misty?" So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
I've changed my format on the podcast a little bit. So I reviewed this last time with Jake, and what we're doing is we're doing about 30 minutes of personal stories and then just some Q&As. So we'll focus a little bit about, growing up, what life was like in your early years, what got you into door-to-door, and then some Q&As on solar. I think we'll hit this may be 1 or 2 episodes. I'm not sure, because we have a pretty interesting story that we've been through together. So we'll start with that. Early years, what was Misty's life like? Born and raised?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Las Vegas. My whole family's been here for a really long time, over 70 years. I was raised by a single father. My mom was in and out of my life periodically. She was an active alcoholic, still is. My dad raised me. I was extremely close to my dad. I was a daddy's girl. I still am. He's, one person in my life that's extremely close to my heart. And I was raised, basically, I was an only child, but my dad worked, long hours, and I became extremely independent at a very young age. I was the woman of the house, so I was basically doing everything at, in first, second grade, but yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because, unlike some of the other interviews that I've done, I know so much about your story. One of the things, and so it'll help me with the interview process, I think, and bring some value to the guests. Let's make sure we pull that up a little bit, is, I know one of the things that was instilled in you very early was work ethic. And I've heard stories about, your dad getting up early to go to a construction job, and Misty has to wake up and pack lunch and get to school. So, but I mean that, and along with, some of the early teenage years, getting jobs and having to work through. So what was that like for you?
It was exactly that. My dad was waking up at 5 a.m. when I was younger in school. So in the early years, I would wake up at 5 a.m. with him, and he would get me ready and then drop me off to safety. But once I started getting to an age of around 7 or 8, where I was able to do it on my own, Dad was already gone at work. I would set my alarm. I would be home alone, wake up, get my breakfast ready, pack my lunch for school, lock the house up, walk to school, and then after school I came home. Same thing, came home, made sure the house was kept, my laundry was done, dishes were done, my homework was done. By the time Dad got home around 4 or 5 o'clock, I had everything finished and was ready to go play. So yeah, basically on my own until Dad got home.
Yeah. And so how did that progress into your teenage years? What did that look like?
Kind of the same thing. In teenage years, I did a little bit of rebelling. My dad, amazing father. He was at times a little controlling. I think, him just being a single father, not knowing a lot of things, just trying to make sure he was doing it right. At times I felt a little bit controlled, a little bit suffocated. So in my early teen years is when I really started to gain more independence away from my dad. I relied heavy on him as a younger child. And as I started to grow a little bit older, I kind of wanted to push that distance away and go figure out life on my own. Of course, at 13, I thought that I had it all figured out.
Yeah. So I want to kind of go into some of the teenage years. So I know that, younger years are a little easier, even though they're hard. Go into the teenage years where you start to build some of your resilience, the rebellion, some of the things that you go into here. And the reason that I want to talk about this is, I really just talked about this on the last podcast with Jake, but one of the things that I see is that people with a little bit of grit and that are a little more scrappy, and they've been through harder things, and it doesn't necessarily have to be our backgrounds. It can be any background. We have a guy in our office, Isaiah. He's just an amazing human. And, he was in the military for 5 years. He was in a military MP. So he's just been through hard things. So I like to talk about the kind of diversity and what made people into who they are today, and a lot of that comes from that childhood background. Absolutely. So what did kind of teenage years look like? Family?
I think even in the younger years, a lot of that helped me later on was the discipline. I really didn't have an option to do anything else but go. And so even at a young age, taking care of myself and dad being at work, it taught me a lot of discipline. And in my teen years, when I wanted to kind of do it my own way, I didn't really want to do it dad's way anymore. That's when I started to rebel. I had a significant event in my life right around 12 years old with my dad, and that kind of threw me off my rails. He was my everything. I put him on a pedestal, and I was a little let down at that age. I think that had a big pivoting moment into who I became in my teenage years. It built a lot of resentment, I guess you could say. I didn't really understand what was happening. I just knew that I was really angry. I always say my first drug was anger. I just got...
Was it because you were let down?
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, I had dealt with that with my mom for a long time as a kid. And I think right around 12 or 13, I finally accepted that, hey, she's got her own things. She's not really going to be a mom. It just is what it is. And my dad, on the other hand, was, my role model, everything I looked up to. And at that time, he started to get into addiction himself, and he kind of let me down. I had to go live with my aunt for about a year at that time. So I think it was a combination of both. It was a combination of, okay, I had my dad there. Now he's not there. So now I'm just going to take care of Misty. And I was, again, at 13 years old. I had no clue how to take care of myself, but I was kind of angry at both of them. And so I think that led me to just want to figure it out on my own.
Mm. So it's an interesting thing, because you say anger was your first addiction. Like, how did that perpetuate in your youth? What did that look like?
That looked like a lot of issues as a juvenile, from the age of 13 to 17, I was arrested a lot, more than a couple dozen times. A lot of those had to do with, battery or domestic violence or anger. I wasn't really sure how to manage the feelings that I was having. I was extremely hurt by the two most important people in my life, which was my mother and father. And instead of, going and crying and feeling sorry for myself, for me, I felt like I was in more control if I was angry or I kept people at a distance. I wasn't going to allow people in. Anger to me was more of a controlling factor. It helped me feel like I was in control of my life now and nobody else was going to hurt me. And so that caused a lot of problems throughout my high school years. In school, I was constantly suspended from school. I did not get along well with others at all. And that was because I had no ability to trust, no ability to be vulnerable. And so that came off as, very cold and angry. And, yeah, it caused a lot of conflict, I would say. As a teenager, it was a big struggle for me.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you say that, because I know how important loyalty, honesty, dependability, all of those things are to you now. And I think, just thinking through this right now, literally in this conversation, a lot of those attributes probably manifested in you from a lack of those things when you were younger. They become so important.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think knowing what it feels like to not have that is what has created that inside of me. It's like, that's what I want to give to the people around me that I love. Lotus, you, like, I would never break that trust or that loyalty with Lotus ever, because I know what that means to a child or a teen. I know what it means to them.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, because I think, like, we see so many different parenting styles, and, the world is just full of different people. But I've noticed that, when we're parenting Lotus together, we kind of have a yin and a yang, but we're both very engaged, and we both understand the meaning of promises and dependability, to Lotus, which is, it's a really special gift to give a child.
Absolutely.
So, you progress, and what are early teenage years look like, late teenage years? What goes on there?
So early teenage years, I found drugs and alcohol. I also found boys and relationships. I was a young girl in my teenage years, and I was lacking love and attention at home. So I think I seeked it from the outside, right? And when I received that attention, it made me feel better. My dad straightened up almost immediately. It was within a year, and I went back home living with him. And at that point, I felt like I was in a position that, my dad felt guilty for what had happened, and that I was already dabbling in drugs, alcohol, bad friends, that I saw an opportunity to just manipulate the situation. So it was really tough when my dad got sober and I moved back in with him. He was ready to be back and be a dad, and I was ready to say, like, screw you, I'm going to do what I want. So it was a very, I don't know what the word is, my relationship with him. There was a lot of turmoil.
Volatile. It's weird.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, is like, we only get one chance at each moment with our kids.
Right.
And, the interesting thing for me is realizing that my mom was just an adult that was trying to, like, adult and parent the best that she could. And she had, a lot of kind of wonky ways. She loved me the best that she could. But once she had set some things into action with me, they were unreversible. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I had already built that resentment. And so when I had come back to live with him, I just, all hell broke loose. I was ready to go crazy. And once I had found drugs and alcohol, that gave me that feeling of calmness, that feeling of being okay. It took away that anger, because that anger just lived inside of me at all times. And so alcohol and drugs immediately eased that, which I liked that. I didn't want to feel it. Of course, anger is a really crappy emotion. Nobody ever really feels good when they're angry. You might in the moment when you feel in control, but afterwards you always feel worse. So as soon as I found that, it was on. I really had no desire to be at home. I was constantly running away. I just wanted away from everyone, because I figured everyone's the problem. Like, let me go figure me out and I'll be okay. Yeah,
that's never worked out good for me either. It's tough.
No, yeah.
So so you start on drugs and alcohol. How long have you been sober now?
12 years in August.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a big deal. So how long, we go from childhood to what age did you actually get sober?
I got sober at 25.
At 25 and you're 37.
Yeah.
So in between your youth and getting sober at 25, I know there was just a catastrophe of life events. And I don't think we need to go all the way down the road of all of those things.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was from, same thing that I went through. There's, homelessness mixed in there. There's drug addiction. There's letting your family down, letting yourself down, jail, just all of this, the catastrophe, right? And then at some point you decide to get sober. What does that moment look like for you? And, and some of these things, and just so the listeners can understand, I think that people have, it's not just drugs and alcohol that people have these moments, right? And I think people, they want to say this rock bottom thing. I don't really think it's a rock bottom. I think it's a moment in your life where you're just sick and tired of just the way things are. And that can be, living, you don't do drugs and alcohol, but you're just living in an existence of like mental and spiritual and financial poverty. Yeah. And you have your kids living in that. And then one day you're like, you know what? I'm sick of it. I'm done. I'm going to do whatever it takes to change who I am. And it's Ed Milet says, it's one of my favorite sayings, is that when you meet somebody wealthy, and that can be mental, spiritual, physical, financial wealth, at some point their family wasn't wealthy, and then the one comes, and I'm the one in my family. Yeah. And it's the same thing with you. But so I'd like to hear the story of what, the moment was that you actually got sober. And then in a little bit, we'll talk about the moment when you decided to, break the change of kind of financial poverty and get into, right? But what was that moment like?
I've said this a lot. So throughout that time from, 13 to 25, when I was using and doing, whatever I wanted, I always had this little thing inside of me that said, I don't belong here. I never felt comfortable in those houses with those people. I didn't feel like I was better than them, but I felt like I was better than this. So there was always something inside of me that knew that I was destined to be more. I was destined to be greater. I wasn't meant to die on the streets an addict. That wasn't why I was here. And I think that kind of held me on for a while there, those times when I really wanted to give up. But you're right. It wasn't a rock bottom. I could have definitely dug a hole way deeper. I went far down the scale, but I could have gone much further. So it was that simply. I remember it was just another arrest, like the rest. It wasn't anything big. This time, though, I was looking at going to prison, and I had basically manipulated as many people as I could. And at that point, everyone was done, including the judge. And I remember sitting in jail, and I was thinking, okay, I have two paths right now. One could be to totally stop manipulating everybody, stop trying to figure it out, stop trying to figure out my way, and completely surrender. No matter what, surrender and do what they say I need to do in order to have a good life, which at that time was, you need to go to a 12-step program, you need to go to treatment, you need to do these things. Or B, I can try and manipulate, try and get out on the streets again. If I don't, I can go to prison. I'll be out in 9 months and then start doing it all over again. And I remember just thinking to myself, I kind of played out what my life would look like both ways. And I knew, I'm like, this is that moment. This is that decision. You're going to either go this way and you're done and you'll either die there, or you're going to go this way and you have a chance and an opportunity at life.
Yeah. It's interesting, like how far back when I try and quantify my success and when it started. And there's a quote I've come really fond of, but it's that don't compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 20. And what I really started to see, like in my life, is like it started 15 plus years ago when I made this macro decision to just be a better person, and then it built and built and built and built and built. And so it's like, sometimes even I will attribute my success to like really especially my financial and mental success, spiritual success, to my last 7 years in door to door. But when I go back further than that, there's 10 plus years of like trying to dig out of my own mental and spiritual and physical constraints to become a better person. And then at some point, all of that catches up and I got better. So
yeah, absolutely. I can definitely relate to that. You know, even the spiritual, I wasn't raised with God or anything really. It was kind of like, hey, there isn't one, there is one. There was nothing. And at that point, at 25, I knew that there was something that kept me going up until then, because I had been in many situations where I just shouldn't be here anymore. And at that point, I think too, it wasn't the spiritual awakening, but that was always in me. I knew that since I was destined for greater, there was something that was going to help me pull out of that, which was a higher power. And so that helped me as well. That was huge.
I love that. So going through, and I just was thinking back just to what you just said. I just love that. There was moments, and it's an interesting thing because I haven't heard a lot of people say that, but there was moments in my life, a lot of moments where exactly like you, I just didn't feel like I belonged there. Like that's not where I belonged. I didn't belong doing the things that I was doing. I didn't belong living in the negative lifestyle. I just didn't fit there spiritually, like internally. And it's a really hard thing to explain to people, like when you're in those things, and, you know, addiction, even like mental, spiritual poverty, they're hard things to understand to people who have found success in other areas, because they're just like, why don't you just stop?
Right.
Just get successful, just work harder, just go get an education. And when you're in those moments, but I felt like I didn't belong there either. So I really relate to that. So in between getting sober, and when we met, which has now been almost 9 years, right? I hope I got that right. 8, we're coming up on 9. So, you know, I know you go through a bunch of odds and end jobs.
Yep.
When we met, you were at this is the bread and butter of door to door for me. 'Cause this is, you know, this is when we find the recruit, the person, when the magic happens, like how they transformed from who they were and became successful in the door-to-door industry. And I think you have one of the coolest stories that I just love your story. So when we meet, you're in, and I'll tell a little bit of the story because I'm involved in it. So it'll be a little bit different than a normal one.
Right.
But when we meet, you were at a pet hospital and I was at Vivint. And so I was working for John Taylor, Kenny Cox, Casey, all those guys in Vivint, doing a year-round program for alarms. No, actually, when we met, I was at Presidential.
There. Yeah.
And I stopped, and we had been together for a couple months, and I quit Presidential, and I went to work for Alarms.
Right.
And so I'm in Alarms was about a year and a half.
Yeah, it was about a year and a half, I think, that you were in Alarms.
And you were in the pet hospital.
Yeah, I was in the pet hospital I wanted to do practice management. That was my passion. I was, I just wanted to make 70, 80 grand a year. And at that point I felt like if I made that, I made it.
So this is what I want to dig into, because this is like what we're dealing with in our industry, right? Is we're dealing with these people who have they're fixated on this certain type of career, this certain picket fence. They're fixated on their 401k. They're fixated on have to have insurance. And you were in the depths of that, right? Like,
yes.
So when we met, what were you making in practice in the pet hospital industry?
When we met I was making $20 an hour. At the pet hospital. I had started, when I had first got sober, I started in that industry at $10 an hour, right? And so for me, in those few years that I was in that industry, I fought my way up from 10 to 20. That was like 5 or 6 raises in between there. And almost every single one of those I asked for. I went in the office and said, this is what I've done. Like, I need more. Right. And so, but at $20, I'm like, I've made it. Like, this is big money. I really did truly think that.
Yeah. And then when we met, you were studying to get a degree in practice management.
Right.
And I remember you would come home and you would have your books and you would and you were hoping for, was it like $25 an hour instead?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was like, I would end up topping out probably like around $70,000 a year, which was, I mean, I thought that was like a huge career move.
Big deal.
Yeah. That's why I wanted to go to school for it,
And I remember, it's funny because I remember the night that I came home from John and Justin Mott took me to Joe's Crab to recruit me. And I remember coming home thinking I could do it. And I needed some reassurance. And I asked you, and you said, if you think you can do it, do it. Yeah. What's interesting is
I had just moved in too,
Yeah,
I think.
it was scary for me because, at that time I had some situations go on, and, I had about $16,000 in the bank, and a car had been wrecked, and I had to pay $14,000. I had about $2,000 in the bank.
Yeah.
And, Lotus's grandma had moved away. My mom had died. She was too sick to take care of Lotus, so she would die soon. But she wasn't helping with Lotus, and it was tough and it was scary. And I just remember coming home, and it's interesting to me because when we're in recruiting meetings with people now, and I hear all of these excuses on why they don't do it, I'm just like, man, I had so many of these excuses, but these were actually, I put that fear behind me and it pushed me forward. And so I remember coming home and you just said, if you think you can do it, do it. And I think back to if I would have not done it, how different our lives would be, and how many people that we've affected, how different their lives would be. But, I get into doors, and at Vivint for a year and a half, and it was a little under a year and a half. It was right into my second year, and I got an offer from a company called Mint Solar to go out to California and run some Sam's Clubs. They had gotten a deal with the Waltons. And so I went to quit. I'm going to quit. And I told you, quit your job. We're moving to California. I put a sign in the front yard. The house was going up for sale. You quit your job. And then John Taylor calls me back to Joe's Crab Shack and makes me a pretty sweet offer. And I'm like, I'm staying. And I remember I called you and I'm like, don't quit your job. We're staying. And so what did that situation look like for you?
So we were planning to do that, and I've always just believed in you. Like, I've just known who you are and how you operate. And I was like, if he thinks he can do it, he can do it, and believing in that. And I was that day that I actually went and gave my resignation letter, which I was super pumped to do because I hated the lady that I worked with. Right. So, I gave the resignation letter, and I did that around 11 a.m. I remember it specifically, and it was lunchtime, literally an hour and a half later. And I looked at my phone, I saw a text, and you said, just wait a minute. Don't do that. I don't think we're going to go. And I had texted you back, and I said, I already did, and I remember I went outside and I called you, and I ripped you a new one, told you how you ruined my life. And this was the worst thing that could ever happen to me, because I was in a massive amount of fear at that point. I was like, oh my gosh, I had worked so hard to get from $10 to $20 an hour. I'm going to school. This is what my career is going to be. And now I've just ended that all. Right. So I was super scared.
Yeah, I remember I was at the table with John, and I text you, and then you called me, and I actually went upstairs. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Joe's Stone Crab in Vegas. I went upstairs by the bathroom to have that conversation and get yelled at for a little while. And, the first thing in my mind was because you had been on doors with me a couple times just, to come see what I did, just to have fun, poke around. And, Vivint Plus had joined the GM office in Las Vegas for Alarm. So we were kind of splitting an office. We'd do correlations in a different room. And I had met Steven and Dusty from Vivint and Plus at that time. And my first thought was man, come sell solar. And I remember pitching that idea to you, and it was just and again, I want to hear your side of it, because these are the things we hear as recruiters in the industry. And when I look back at your decision, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for your decision. Right. And when we look at my decision sparked your decision, but your decision sparked the success, because combined we've done what we've done, but it sparked that. And so I'd like to talk about when I was pitching you solar, first of all, come sell solar, what was that like for you? What were your thought processes?
First, I had never done sales, right? So immediately I'm like, I don't think I can do that. You've always kind of just had that, right? You're the face of everything, right? And it's easy for you to talk to people, and it's probably not easy. You've worked to get to that point, and being in front of the room and all of that. Me, I'm an introvert, but an extrovert too. I think I'm both. But I was terrified. I thought, I've never done sales, so I can't do it. Two, I don't know, dealing with people. And I was in the pet industry because I love dealing with animals, right? And so I was like, how well am I going to do with people? I was scared of that. And it was completely out of my comfort zone. 110%. It was nothing that I had, nothing like I had ever done before, or even, at all. There was nothing in sales or door to door that I was like, hey, I have a little experience in that. I might be able to do it. So zero experience and a fear of failure was my biggest resistance.
It's terrifying. And what's interesting is like how many people we've recruited we've been in business together for just over 5 years. I've been indoors for 7. But the amount of people that we recruited that have come from the bar industry or the sound industry or the stage industry or the rest, just anything, most of the people that we recruited and trained over time are people just like us that didn't have any experience. So unpack that feeling for me. You get in, it's like, this is the magical thing with recruiters, right? We always want to make our recruits feel like it's a job interview, but really we just want you to come and work here, right? Big secret. So, Dusty and Steven give you the big job interview.
Right.
Like, it's a body. Yeah. Let's get you in and see what you can do.
Right.
What is that like for you? Is, coming from where you were, a male industry, all of that, and then, doors and like the undertaking of learning a pitch and knocking and schedules. What was that like?
It was, it was terrifying when I started. And I think that because I was so scared, that's what helped me become successful. Because I had, a lot of the times we give these, new hire guides and we give a pitch and all this. I obsessed on solar. Like it was all I did was watch videos and YouTube and read articles and ask questions. And I remember, Steven, my manager at the time, he would joke and say, I've literally never met another person that asked as many questions as Misty does. And it was just because I wanted to know absolutely everything. Because at that point I had made the decision. I'm like, I made the decision, just like when I stopped drinking drugs, doing drugs and alcohol. I had surrendered to the fact that I was going to work an hourly job and be in the pet industry. That was done. And so this is what I was doing. I was making a decision and I was going to refuse to fail. And so the only way that I could do that was giving 110%. And both of my managers, Steven and Dusty, they were amazing. It was, I think I was the only girl that was in there that would come consistently. We had a couple other girls, but as we all know how we run the ship, you're there every single day. And that's where I was. I was there every day, practicing my craft and learning and trying to figure it out. But
it's interesting because looking back on that, I remember we were in California one time and you were doing pipeline management in the car. And I remember thinking, did I just mess up? Like, did I just trade my girl in for like, she's just like, we're on vacation. What's going on? And I'm an alarm guy, right? At that time, I'm like, what is pipeline management? Like, no, the account's right. So it was interesting for me. And when you were saying that, I was like, I don't think there has been anyone like that until Joey Weir. He was very similar, asking a million questions. But it's this, it's interesting listening to that because when you really like think about the industry and the people that become successful, they immediately, and especially in solar, if you don't take solar seriously immediately, you're going to get jacked up. You're going to get your teeth kicked in. You're going to get financial insecurity. You're going to get overwhelmed by, you see people come in and they're like, kind of. And then week 3, they start to take it seriously. And you're like, man. And then week 4 or 5, they finally get a sale because they weren't coming in and then they're gone because they didn't. You have to come in and treat it like you're fighting a lion day one. And I saw you do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's extremely important. And that's a lot of the things that I see new people come in and it's, I try to, you're the one who always believes the best in everyone, right? Like they're going to make it, they're going to this. And I kind of can watch a room and it's like a sixth sense because I can see either they're engaged and they're 110% and they're like, I'm going to do this no matter what. Or they're like, I don't know if this is for me. I kind of want to do it, and those ones you usually just see fall off fairly quickly. But that was, one of the biggest things I think that helped me as a new rep with zero experience was studying my craft. It was like, you're not just going to come in by osmosis and go to correlation a few times and know what you're supposed to do. It doesn't work that way, and even on that, I remember Brian Tracy, that was my first book. I never listened to books. I just didn't, right? And so that book helped me immensely just in my first couple months. Like, people don't understand how powerful just listening to a book is, and that book was it was amazing. I mean, it helped me a lot.
I love that. So I'm just pulling back up your stats here. So let's just talk about some of the early times here. And I remember doing some of these calls with you, and I remember when you got the bat for culture. I remember when you had all the installs. I also remember you're essentially what took me out of alarms, because you would come home and you would go out and knock with like Willie and you would knock for you would go out at like 3 and knock till like 6.
Right.
And you would come home and then you would sell a deal. And this is, Vivint Plus back then, so they're not around. So we can talk a little bit of shit about how much money they were making. Not a lot, like $300 a kilowatt, $250 sometimes. But I was making $250 or $300 an alarm because I'm out chucking in alarms, trying to get my volume up so I can get my back in. So I'm giving away, doorbell. It's like so, and you're making $300 a kilowatt, and you're selling a 9 kilowatt, and you're telling me how much you're making. And I'm like, I got to get out of alarms.
Yeah.
So, but it was interesting. So your first quarter, you were MVP, you sold 20 and 19. Some of this I've attributed to, I see 2 types of salespeople in my estimation. There's an emotional sales based type person, and there's an analytical based person, right? And you're a very analytical based person. And generally when the analytical based person can dive into the information and really get going, one of the things that we pride ourselves on in our industry now is that we have an 80% plus pull-through rate all the way through the region. And some of our members in Vegas have 87, 88% pull-through rates. I attribute a lot of that to educating our customers. And so I'd just like you to speak a little bit about your first quarter, you sell 20 and install 19. I think everybody listening can agree that that's absolute beast mode for Q1 for a brand new rep on doors that's never been indoors. It's amazing. What do you think attributed to that?
I mean, there was a couple things, one of them was the education of me diving in and learning absolutely everything that I could about solar. My biggest fear was, back then there was no setter closer program.
Soft-tune only.
Yeah. I went on, one deal with my manager, Dusty, and then the next deal I was on my own, and I did close that deal. They ended up canceling, but
that was the one that canceled.
I sat at that table. I think it was almost 4 hours on my first deal on my own, and I remember I called Dusty and Steven and Willie probably 10 times throughout, and they ended up canceling. But it was my education, my willingness to ask for help, and the biggest thing I think was being with my customers was, one thing was my integrity. That was not going to waver no matter what. And I think that's the biggest thing in home is the legitimacy and the trust, with the customer, and being able to educate them and not just making shit up because, they want the correct information. And when you're giving them information and you're doing it without integrity, I think that that's not sustainable, and you can sell a crap ton of solar doing it the right way. But it was just diving in and, taking all the resources that I could, where we're at currently at Legacy. There's so many resources that are just not utilized. People just don't utilize them, I guess, because it takes extra work. But I was willing to do the extra work. I wanted to be successful. And once I started to see that, hey, it's simply as going in and building a relationship with someone I've never met. You know, I could tell you off the top of my head probably 25 customer names from my first year.
Yeah.
Like I built relationships with these people, and my goal was simply to help them and to, you know, build that relationship. So that, my integrity, and just going all in.
Yeah. And you did what, 50 installs in 2 quarters?
In those 6 months that I was there. Yeah.
Pretty good. The money wasn't great. I think we made like 80 grand on that.
I think I made a little over 80,000.
But coming from the pet,
that was double my income, right?
Yeah.
And I had done that in 6 months. So for me, like, having a month where, you know, each week my check is $2,500 or $3,000, you know, and I remember, I think it was like the first month I had made, not the first month in, but the first time I had ever made like 15,000 in a month. I was just in shock. Like I couldn't believe that this was actually going to my bank account.
Let me ask you, and just real quick, so I'm definitely not crapping on Vivint here. We just had lower payouts on sun hours. I attribute a lot of both of our success to Vivint. Love Vivint.
Absolutely.
Just lower pay. And that's just a shout out to where we're at in today's solar game. Like, be grateful for how much we all get paid in this game.
Definitely.
Let me ask you, how much, like, from your paradigm, because I know we think very differently, right? I'm like, I'm the balloon, you're the anchor. Right. From your paradigm, getting those checks, like, how did that, like, you know, because we see a lot of people and they'll sit in the room with highly successful people, mentally, spiritually, physically, financially. You know, they're sitting next to a $300,000, $500,000, $750,000, $1 million earner doing the same thing that they're doing, and they just can't seem to see the forest past the trees. They can't make it to correlation. They can't study. Like, from your paradigm, how did getting those checks change your view of like the world and the industry and what possibilities were?
Yeah, I mean, I came from a very fixed mindset home. I mean, I was raised, you know, constantly being frugal, constantly saving. You know, I joke with my dad. I say he's been getting laid off for the last 30 years because he's always lived in that kind of like, financial of like, you know, and he's done well for himself. He doesn't need to. It was just part of how he was raised. But when I started receiving those, you know, that type of income, I think it was definitely a journey going from a fixed mindset to abundance. But I had started to see that, you know, I was looking at the people around me, which were amazing people. I attribute a ton to, you know, Willie was one of my big mentors in the beginning, and Steven and
Sanabria.
Willie Sanabria. He was, he helped me immensely. I have a great photographic memory. I can think of times walking down the street with him and stuff that he taught me, you know, and Steven and Dusty. But I was looking around and I was like, really the only difference here is that I'm a girl and these are guys, right? And I'm like, if they can do it, I can do it. Like, I have what it takes to do it. When I started to see that, well, I can sell, I can knock, I can do these simple things that they're asking. I was used to going to work, you know, 40 hours a week. I was used to grinding. And like you said, it wasn't like I had to do a 10-hour knocking day in order to find success, you know? So I started to discover what abundance meant. And there was a long road to that. It wasn't, you know, my first time I make 15 grand. I'm like, I see the future. I can be $1 million earner. It took a lot through there, but that's what clicked was, hey, there is money is everywhere, right? And there's tons of it to be made. And it's simply how much effort I put into that. I started to see money come in based off of how much effort I was giving, and me being very disciplined and having an extremely good work ethic. I'm like, man,
more effort,
there's more effort, more money, you know, more success, more, all of that, just mentally, emotionally, spiritually, more effort gave me more. So
I love that. I think one of the things that we both share, we share a lot of things in common, but we have a lot of things that we don't have in common. We're opposites in a lot of areas, which is part of the reason that we're so successful is, you know, I'm literally, like, when I say I'm the balloon and you're the anchor, I'm just listening to a book. It's on adult ADHD, and it's called How to Be a Hunter in a Farmer's World. And the first thing he does is attribute his success to his wife because he says, I've started so many businesses that she manages. And I was like, man, that's me, right? I'm this ADHD, like go, 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 big idea, here, deal with all this stuff, please. Can you
figure it out?
Figure this out. Like, I've got the car rolling. Can you drive it? So that's been really cool. And thank you for who you are. But one of the things that we share in common is that we are both really married to the process. You know, the incomes that income lines that we've crossed from, my first year in door to door was 130. My second was 190. Our combined year was, we did 386, 750. Then we passed one and then up and up from there. But the money has not ever been our focus. It's always been the people and the processes. We're married to the process. So talk about that for a little bit, because I see people getting big check syndrome, and they make their goal is to make 50 grand or 100 grand. They make that and they just kind of turn off, and you never really see them turn into big earners because the process stops, the mental process, the physical, the spiritual process. So what's your experience on that?
Yeah. I mean, we are very different in a lot of ways. And like I've always said, because I can be very reserved, and you are the idea person. And a lot of the things that we've done together, we wouldn't be there without the great idea, right? So yeah, I can manage and implement, but I'm terrified of the initial idea of taking the jump and taking the risk. And so on the process for me essentially was, I had dove straight in and gave it all that I could. And I was starting to reap benefits, not just in financially, but I was able to reap benefits, emotionally, spiritually, by reading books, by being around high level people, by listening to Casey Baugh, those types of things. I started seeing like, wow, this industry is so much more than just going and knocking on a door. Like, this industry is transforming me as a human being. Like, it was not the money. It was the process. It was who I was becoming in this industry. And I was being challenged to do things that I had never done before. I was being challenged to be open-minded to things that I had never tried before. And I was looking at all of these highly successful people around me, and I wanted to be more like them. And the piece of me, that same piece of me that knew I didn't belong in those other places when I was using, there was that piece of me that was like, this is where I belong. I belong with these people. I deserve to be in the rooms with these people, and the only way that I can continue to belong is by continuing to put in more effort and growing. I didn't want to be in a room with people like that and know that, hey, I'm giving it like 20% and I'm not doing what I should be doing in order to be in this room. I wanted to feel confident. I wanted to feel at ease. Of course, I still have, like with Doug Robinson and Casey Baugh, those guys, I have anxiety and I'm like, am I supposed to be around these people? But at the same time, like that was what, for me, being married to the process was like, I'm becoming a different human. I'm not just coming in here and learning sales. I'm not just coming in here and learning a pitch or how to sell solar, what the product is.
Try to make some money.
Yeah, or try to make some money, or it had absolutely nothing to do with that. It was like, I'm coming in here to change everything about me in a positive way. And the result is I make a lot of money, which is amazing, right? I say so many times, like, and I've said it to you, I've said it to some of our managers, like, guys, do we really understand how lucky we are to be in an industry like this? It's so amazing. Like, we're surrounded by high level individuals that have done so many things to show us how to become more like them. You don't get that anywhere else. You really don't. And then at the same time, we're making crap ton of money. Like, we're blessed. We're very lucky.
I love that. Yeah. It's an interesting way to think about it. Even for me now, I mean, and obviously we talk a lot, but it's really falling in love with the process of becoming. And not, luckily for me, you deal with all the money. I don't pay attention to it. I have a couple $100 in my bank account and an Amex, right? Like, you move all the money away from me is the best you can. But it's what I focus on. I focus on, like, I'm so worried, I focus on the law of the lid. Yeah. I can't allow my people to grow into me mentally, spiritually, physically, financially, because if I do, I lose my value. And in, servitude leadership, it really is that. But from the beginning, I agree with you. Like, I got past the doors and into the books and into Casey and into, John Taylor back then, coming in and doing correlations and going to Vivint and hearing Todd speak. And, it was really like, and then becoming a different person myself. And you're right. And I'm still in a mad pursuit of that in everything that we do. And I do. It's a really cool way to look at it. So we go from Vivint Plus into a dealer program.
Yeah.
We started a dealer.
Yeah.
And for 4 years, just about, we ran a very successful dealer, Arcadia Solar's largest dealership at that time for many years. Yeah. And to be and I appreciate all your vulnerability so far. And there was it was about our second year, we actually almost got divorced because there was and when I say that, I don't say that lightly. We were so separated by work, and we were each so consumed by work. I was knocking and selling still, and recruiting and training. You were doing full pipeline management. And I don't know that anybody will remember this, but back in, not too long ago, right? Just like cell phones, like not long ago, we had flip phones. Well, not long ago in the EPC world, outside of like a Vivint Sunrun world, if you were working for a dealer 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, you may have been doing paper contracts, like the big fold out ones. And we were all the way down. We were having to use apps to take paper contracts and make them digital. You were building out every single proposal. The pipeline management and building everything out you were doing, it was insane. Yeah. So talk about that and just kind of sum up those 4 years, because I want to talk about the difference between dealer programs now and big companies now. But I want to hear your experience on those 4 years of running as a salesperson, running full operations for sales for an EPC.
Yeah, I mean, it was arduous. It was. I'm extremely grateful for all of that time, because it made me who I am today, and it's helped us propel us into where we are in the industry, but that first year was a lot. I mean, when we had started, I remember it was like the first week we're like, okay, we're going to be a dealer. And then I'm like looking at this, the program was Citon, and I had absolutely no clue how to do anything. And I'm like, oh, I got to design a system, And so at that time we had, we did have paper contracts. We had no proposal software except for you build it yourself.
There was no solo back then.
Yeah, no, there was no solo. It was, hey, you figure it out. When, our reps, we started to build, and our closers would be in home. I mean, Sandra can remember, you had to text me all the customers' information, the production, the system size, the price, all of that. And then I carried around, I had an iPad and a laptop that was hooked to me for 3 years. I mean, that thing went everywhere with me, and I would go in and create docs on my iPad and send them. And it was a lot, and in the beginning, probably for the first year, I was still with you selling. We were selling,
Absolutely.
And then we grew, and I could no longer do that. It was, it just wasn't possible.
Yeah.
Due to the amount of operations that needed to be done in the dealer. And so, yeah, I mean, it was just learning, through that, I learned a ton of systems. That was one of the things, like, I realized in building teams in this industry, is that if you don't have systems in place, like, you're likely going to fail. Like, you have to have systems. And that taught me that, there was a lot of times that I learned hard lessons and implemented new systems, and I think, for speaking on to what you were talking about, us almost getting divorced, I think the work became an addiction in a sense. I was obsessed with it. I was married to the process, but I became obsessed with working. It was, I woke up in the morning and I look at my phone before I even had coffee or anything. And it was like I had an email from a rep or an email from our, the Arcadia, or I needed something to get done. And I couldn't allow myself to just even have 10 minutes in the morning. It was like on from that point on until, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And it was just 14, 15-hour days.
Well, we didn't have, this last trip last year to Italy was the first vacation that we've ever taken where you were 100% away from work in 5 years. For the 3 or 4 years, it got a little better towards our 4th year, but for the first 3 years, we literally did not have a vacation where you weren't working at least 2 to 3 hours a day. And this includes, we've kind of replaced it with a roofing company, right? Because now you're doing payroll for the roofing company. But this included we would be on a vacation and you would have to run a full, Arcadia wasn't doing it. They're not doing our commissions. No. So you'd have to do weekly commissions. So it would be Friday on a vacation and you're up in the morning, wherever, Cancun, wherever the heck we are, doing commissions for 2 or 3 hours on all of the reps and overrides and this and that. It was insane. Yeah. So, and thank you, by the way, for being amazing. So, a couple years ago, we decided we're going to go to Legacy. Yeah. And that was a really serious decision for us. We were earning more than $1 million a year. There was a lot at stake. We had a lot of people on our teams that were making really good money, that were trusting us. We had a great EPC. They were installing good. We had a really good relationship with John Murphy. We were longtime friends with Seth. I'd knocked with Seth. And we had talked prior, and it was never really possible because at that point Legacy wasn't the EPC. They were using Titan, and we weren't huge fans of Titan, and their installation and sales processes weren't great for us, so we never could bring that to fruition. But then Legacy decided to go EPC, and that kind of opened that conversation up for us. I'd like to talk about a little bit, because we both went through this together, and I think it's a really good topic, especially for where the market's at now. We've seen banks go out of business. We've seen EPCs go out of business. We saw Empire. I don't know what's going on with Titan right now. I know they're selling their corporate headquarters. I know they got kicked out of Nevada right? But we see all these little EPCs are starting to fail, with these crazy low red lines, and they're having a hard time getting this, and the banks can't carry the weight of, and we're in a really different time of the solar industry. One of my favorite things to say is, the floor is lava. It's a really scary place to be right now. Yeah. But let's take it back to our decision. And for me, the decision was a podcast. It started with a podcast from Casey Baugh. And I heard him say that, he remembered a time in his life where he was sitting at the table of comfort for too long. Yeah. And I knew that I couldn't do any more than I was doing in the dealer program. And we had hired, we had you running full operations. We had Chase, we were paying him $6,500 a month to be the operations. We were paying rent, this, that, solo, $6,500 a month for solo, $6,000 a month for rent. We were paying $6,500 for a co-operations manager, and then everything else. And it was like, I couldn't recruit, and I didn't have the, it was just so much. Yeah. And I knew that the 4 or 5 megawattish was my cap at that. Right. And I started to think like Legacy. Yeah. And you were a little ambivalent because you're like, this is hard, but we're doing pretty good. So what was that transition like for you?
Yeah. It was super scary. It was another one of those times where I was absolutely terrified. A lot of people on our team, have been with us for a really long time. Right. Yeah. And so I've always looked at it, and you've taught me this too. We work for them. Mm-hmm. Right. So,
for our people.
Yeah, we work for our people. 100%. It's not like they are working for us. We work for them. 100%. And, I look at all the people that have been around for a long time, the Sandras, the Joeys, these people's lives are just as important to me as, my dad's life or my sister's life. And, at that point, I had felt the same. I had felt capped in the dealer program. I felt like we didn't have the ability to really scale. I felt like we were limited on our resources. I had created a bunch of great systems. I had pushed Arcadia to become better with tech, but it was still very archaic. Mm-hmm. The systems.
And just so I can highlight, the thing with Arcadia is a great company, but they're very construction centric, and not sales centric.
Yeah,
and
they're an amazing installer.
Really hard, but construction centric is really difficult for a sales organization.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so as we grew, you know, and we got bigger and bigger, it became even harder, right? And so we were figuring out all the resources. We were figuring out all the systems. And like you mentioned, all the things we were paying for to try to make it better for our teams, right? To make things easier for them. And so when the opportunity of legacy appeared, you know, I was scared. I was terrified. We had built our business. We had worked extremely hard to get where we were. And I knew that everybody that was behind me, you know, like their lives were in our hands. Yeah. And it wasn't that I was just scared for our family, like I was scared for their families. Yeah. And I knew that, hey, if I make this decision, it has to be an all in 110%. Mm-hmm. And I have to be able to communicate to all of our people, you know, why it's a good decision, why we're putting them in the best situation that they could be in. And yeah, it was scary. It was a jump. A large jump on the red line, those kind of things that people talk about, you know, and it's like, but I just wanted to mention when you were saying that, I thought about, but the value, mm-hmm. right? And so what I've always looked at that is like, what value is being added? And so I don't pay attention to red lines or anything like that. And a lot of our people don't, because they're looking at what they're getting, what their value is being added to them. And it's not okay, you're a installer that goes in a week, but you do a shitty install. My customers calling me and they're freaking out. And, mm-hmm. you know, all the things that go along with that, with guys that just jump from one to another and are looking for the, you know, the best girl at that time. Mm-hmm. and it doesn't work out. You know, Legacy kind of checked all the boxes, and we were at a cap. You were the best guy in the room, you know, not saying that in an egotistical way, but you were. And it was like, that was one thing that I loved so much about Vivint. Is like just being around those high level individuals that I could aspire to be like. We got away from that in the dealer program. You know, those were all the things that pushed me in the beginning, that propelled me to be greater. And going in and, you know, going to corporate and meeting with Doug and Luke and, you know, and of course Seth, he was our brother, and Cam, just everyone there, Damien, it was like, oh, these are the rooms that I want to be in. You know, this is what I'm missing.
Makes you feel good.
Yes, this is what I've been missing for the few years. This is what lit my fire in the very beginning. This is what sparked me to become who I am today. Like, I'm ready to get back in those rooms with those people.
I love that. What's interesting is, like, I'm exactly like you in all of those things. Like, our people are the most, like, because, you know, you know, sweat and bleed with these people. Like, there's a lot of these people are a family. Like, I'm a very reclusive person. I know I hang out with you and Lotus at home, and then my friends are all in the industry. Like, they're more than friends, they're family. And it's interesting because, of course we had dealer red lines and we had all these red line hikes because we come here, and every single one of our people, including us, have all made way more money. Yeah. And it's because of the processes, the scalability, the options that we have. So it's been really cool to see, because people are always chasing that first. Yeah. And it's like you said, guys are always chasing this girl, but people are always, you know, when we're younger, we're always chasing this look. Mm-hmm. Like, we want to be attracted, and they have to have this attraction. Yeah. And as we get older, we realize that attraction oftentimes comes with a bunch of stuff that we don't want. Yeah. And what we should be looking for first is somebody that has value, somebody that's loyal, somebody that's respectable, somebody that's dependable, somebody that's going to be there with us in hard times. Yeah. Somebody who, you know, and in solar, like the company, who's going to inspire us, who's going to make us grow. And then that ecosystem fulfills into large amounts of money because everything is fulfilled properly. So I've always kind of been the opposite of that. You know, we had our partnership with Arcadia, and we were loyal that entire time. Of course, you know, we had offers, we had people come to us. I have never been attracted to the crappy installer with the great red line. I think that has a lot to do with my integrity and, you know, not only with my people, but my customers. And it's like, you know, I always want, when I'm in a home and I'm explaining something to somebody and I'm telling them that I'm going to be there for them, and so is the company, I have to truly believe that and know that no matter what, you know. And that was a big thing. Arcadia was great at that, and Legacy is too. You know, that was a huge thing. I wanted to make sure that whatever we were promising to our homeowners was going to be able to be delivered. So it wasn't about how much money I could make. It was, hey, can I sell a great product with a great company
and have a great experience for my customers and all of my reps and teams, and make a great amount of money doing it, you know? So I've never really been there. I do know there's a lot of people that go that way and are attracted to that. It's just never, it's never attracted me. I've never wanted anything to do with that.
Well, the funny thing is you stay in the industry long enough and it's like you see that I don't see a lot of those people.
Yeah.
I can't actually think of one that is highly successful in the areas of mental, spiritual, physical, and financial, meaning like, you know, they don't have huge groups of people because their priorities are backwards. And when your priorities are backwards, you're going to get backwards results, right?
Yeah.
So not too much longer. I have one last topic that I want to talk about, and it's Fortitude Roofing.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about our roofing company because it's so successful, and it's successful because of you. Again, I had this great idea and I found a qualifying employee, and I got him and I paid him and I took him down. We had him pass the test, and I, you know, spent months getting my contract put on the contractor's license. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done.
Now we're a roofing company.
Now we're a roofing company. Drive the car, honey. Figure it out. But that's the funny part. But what I want people to also, some of the things that we've done is we, you know, own multiple real estate properties, right? And so we're in, you know, we buy houses. We buy a couple houses a year, additional to what we already own. So we have a real estate portfolio, and we have a roofing company that did, you know, $1.5 million last year. You know, we have a couple trucks, warehouse, all this great stuff. So the focus is the solar and this career being the propulsion system for things to come in the future. Like when, and gang, I'm not saying any of that to brag. You know, we've done a lot of hard work, and the door-to-door industry has been the propulsion system to give us the finances to do those things, to buy a real estate portfolio, to own a roofing company, to start something different. And so I want you to talk about, you know, what that experience has been like you, because, you know, we have big goals. My goal is to make or have $50 million in personal holdings, properties, equities, companies, valuations in the next 7 years. Not quite sure exactly how that's going to get there. I have a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
You know, but our view of wealth and generational wealth and creating generational opportunities for our children and our families have changed dramatically. And doors to me have been the propulsion system for that. And when, you know, when I see a rep sitting in a chair and I'm like, I was you, I'm still you. I'm just a version further down the road. I'm no better. I've just been engaged longer. And because I've done that, things have become possible that I never thought possible. And so what has that been like for you, going through those evolutions of abundance, wealth, prosperity, vision, what we can do with what we're doing? What's that been like for you?
I mean, so far it's been an amazing ride, and we're not done yet. You know, I think that's what my mindset has always been, is like, I want more. It's not more money. It's not, but I want more of everything. You know, it's like, I want more abundance. I want more mentors. I want more leadership. I want to learn more. It's like, I'm never really satisfied. And it's not that it's, you know, not satisfied within, because I am satisfied within. I'm always looking to become better and greater at every aspect in my life. And I attribute all of it to door to door. Like, there's absolutely no way that I would be who I am today without getting into this industry and meeting these people. And of course, having you as, you know, my partner this entire time. So for me, the journey has been, amazing. I have learned so much, and it's taught me, you know, with the roofing company, that was another thing. Like, I was like, I can't do this shit, you know, just like with door-to-door sales, like my immediate reaction is like, oh my God, I can't do this. And then I look from within and I'm like, no, you can do this. Mm-hmm. Like, you can do this, you know, everything that I've ever tried to tackle, I've always done it. You know, it's just, I just go. And so the roofing company is finally at a place where, and I attribute a massive amount of that to my sister. She's helped me immensely, but that's another factor, is like delegation. But this industry has, you know, blessed me to be able to help my family. You know, I've been able to help my dad in situations, you know, my stepsister, my sister, your family. Like, we've been able to do so much with, you know, the abundance mindset, being able to build, growing constantly. And yeah, I mean, I'm kind of going in circles because I feel like it's hard to describe. Right. It really is. Like, looking at someone that's just coming into the industry, it's like, I wish, you know, they see who we are now, you know, and some of the people have been with us for a while, not from day one at Vivint Plus, you know, or at Vivint Alarms. Yeah. But I wish they could see what it took. A lot of them would probably say, never mind, and walk out the door, right? Because they're not willing to put in that much work. But there's a lot of people that we've seen already that are like, okay, show me how to do it. Yeah. And they go do it, you know, the Sandras, the Joeys, those guys are like, show me and I'll do it. Yeah. So the journey has been, you know, a blessing. I've learned so much, and we're not done yet. Like, I want to just keep going. I don't know if I'll ever be done. Yeah.
It's weird. I've been, you know, I've been thinking a lot about the journey, the destination, gratitude, thankfulness. And you know, I've come to a place in my life where I'm just extremely grateful for where I am and everything that's transpired. The good, the bad, the good people, the bad people, the negative, the positive, the good mistakes the good things I've done, the mistakes that I've made. I'm just grateful for all of it because it's equal to this. And, you know, but still there's this thing inside that says, but what next? But what next? What I've really determined is, and I've heard this a few times and it's helped me kind of quantify it, but you get to that place. In fact, I just heard Tony Robbins unpacking this with what's the guy with the comedian we saw him with the ponytail, the kind of hillbilly kid.
Oh, Theo Vaughn.
Theo Vaughn. Yeah. I love Theo Vaughn. But so Tony Robbins doing a podcast with Theo Vaughn, and Tony Robbins asked Theo, he says, well, you know, like when you get to finally that thing, you wanted to make $500,000 and you made it. How long does that feeling last? And he's like, it's anywhere from 30 minutes to maybe 6 weeks. And he's like, how long for you? And he was like, really, it's like a couple hours, a day or two. Like, you know, I'll get like, I got a watch, or I got a car, I made some money. And it's like, oh, that's so cool. And then, you know, you get it and you're like, what next? And it's, you know, I have wrestled with myself. Is that dissatisfaction? Right. No, the what next is part of the building the process. And that's part of like falling in love with that process. And that's part of the beautiful thing in life. And I heard there's a guy I follow on TikTok. He's a big buff guy, Sam. And he said, and it really stuck with me, the guy who likes walking will always walk further than the guy who likes the destination. Yeah. And I just determined myself to be a guy who likes walking.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that. We're a little short. We're over.
Okay.
What would you say to, and when I say that, I try and keep my one episodes under an hour 20, but what a great interview. What would you say to the reps in their first couple years, 2-3 years, or the people who are aspiring to try and get to higher income levels, the people who are, you know, because, you know, we all have the same fear. We all have the same anxieties. It's just how we're dealing with them. But what would you say to people earlier on in their career who are looking to try and achieve great things?
So, you know, one thing that's always stuck with me, I don't know who said it, but, you know, making a decision is action. It's not just making a decision, right? And so for me, when I made the decision and as a new rep, like, you're either going to make the decision that this is what's going to be for, you know, I don't put any time limit on it, you know, for now in the present, this is what I'm going to do and I'm all in, or you're not making that decision. And so after you make that decision, because some people are still, oh, well, I kind of want to do it 3 days a week. Or if I only do, you know, I'll do 2 hours a day, or they're trying to figure out some loophole of how they can half-ass the industry.
The red pill.
And still become successful. And it just doesn't work. You know, anybody that I've seen that's gotten to greatness here is not doing it half-ass. So it's making that decision to become great, taking the action, and then doing whatever it takes. And so if, you know, Lee's saying you need to read these 5 books in order to become a great salesman, go read the 5 books. You know, if Casey says that if you do Sunday planning, you're going to do the Sunday planning, like all those things that they say, like how you're going to become great is the action It does not happen by just thinking about it or wanting to be great, or, if I just show up for correlation, like none of that. You have to go all in. And I think you're a lot better with recruiting because, you're able to talk them through that. Me, I'm like, hey, are you going to give it 100? Because if you're not, you're going to suck and it's not going to happen.
Fired.
You're fired. You can't make it, because that's what my experience was, is like, you got to go all in, and it's better to give them a easier, softer, you got to go all in than, hey,
Sometimes.
go all in or you're fired. But that's it. Making a decision and then taking the action and doing whatever it takes to become successful. And that's whatever it takes to become successful. At times I was working 12, 14-hour days.
Yeah.
But that's what it took at that time, It took that to be able to go on a 2-week vacation to Italy after 4 years and be able to experience something that I've wanted to do since I was a little kid that I never thought possible. The things that have happened in my life since I came into door to door, and it sounds like cliche and corny, beyond my wildest dreams, like absolutely beyond my wildest dreams. If you would have told me that I would make 7 figures, if you would have told me that I would own multiple properties, if you would have told me that I'd be surrounded by some of the greatest leaders that I've ever known, like I would say, I don't know about that. I think I'm going to be in practice management at the animal hospital. Like this has completely changed my life, but I believe only because I gave it my all and I took the action.
I love that. And just a closing thought, I think one of the things that timelines just get me. They really do. Like like physical timelines. And, if I hadn't have made my decision or you hadn't, what if I would have said, hey, don't quit your job. And you're like, I already quit. And then I said, come do solar. And you're like, you know what, actually, I'm just going to go find another practice management job. There's a call out to people, like when you're in this and you've started this and it's hard, the only way to fail here is to quit.
Yep.
Like I've seen a lot of people take them 6 months, a year and a half to figure this thing out. But when they do, it can change your life for the rest of your life. And then it can eventually change your children's lives for the rest of their lives. And then sometimes your children's lives. And so
or
when you look
family.
at when you look at commitment, look at the timeline of what could happen if you quit. Can you go back and be average? You can. Mm-hmm. If you stay, can you be exceptional? You can. And so it's a real focus on that. So Misty, thanks for taking the time today. Long overdue. A lot of gratitude for you.
Love you.
Love you too. I appreciate you coming on and for everything that you've done for me and the businesses, driving all the cars that I set in motion, and for our family. I love you.
I love you too. Thanks, Jake, for telling him I needed to get on here. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Jake Ransom. All right. Thanks, gang. Bye.